It came at 12:08 a.m., not at 9 p.m. when late-night emails are still forgivable, not even at 11:30 when managers sometimes accidentally hit send. No, 12:08, a time so late it wrapped around to early, a time when nothing good ever arrives. Subject: 7 a.m. performance review, mandatory attendance. There was no salutation, no context, no reason, only a single cold line in the body of the email. Early scheduling ensures privacy for what may be an emotional discussion. Lana read it once, twice, then again hoping that somehow she had misread it, but the words didn't change, and deep down she already knew what they meant. She had heard whispers in the halls, half jokes at lunch tables. 7 a.m. reviews are never about performance. They're about cleaning house before the lights come on. It's when they want you gone and silent. Her stomach tightened, a slow burn that spread to her chest. She had never missed a deadline, never turned in sloppy work. She had trained new hires, saved the company money, won quiet praise from other departments. But none of that mattered when someone powerful decided you were inconvenient. And Dominic Vale, he was exactly that kind of powerful. He didn't yell, he didn't threaten, he weaponized quiet, the kind that sounds almost polite until you realize it's the silence before collapse. Lana sat at her kitchen counter, the glow of her laptop casting sharp lines across her face. The apartment was still. No cars passed outside. Even the refrigerator had gone silent, as if it too was holding its breath. She opened a new tab, typed in, "How to handle a surprise performance review," closed it. This wasn't about feedback. This was a performance review, the same way an ambush is a conversation. But Dominic had forgotten one thing. For 6 months, he had underestimated her, dismissed her, erased her, and in doing so, he never saw what she was building quietly behind the scenes. He thought she'd walk into that conference room at 7 a.m. alone, but Lana had spent months preparing for that moment. She was walking in with everything she needed, and Dominic Vale, he was about to find out just how dangerous a quiet woman can be when she decides not to stay quiet anymore. The conference room was quiet as a morgue. Fluorescent lights flickered slightly above harsh, but still not bright enough to cut through the early morning haze. Outside the city was only just beginning to stir, but inside, time felt frozen, artificial, staged. Lana paused at the door. The silence wasn't natural. It was curated like a stage before curtain rise. There he was, Dominic Vale, leaning back in his chair, arms folded, lips curled into that slow, venomous smile, the kind that never quite reached the eyes. "Right on time," he said, voice calm, measured, too calm. The clock read 6:59 a.m. He had been here for a while. No papers on the table, no laptop, just a thick manila folder, her name printed in block letters on the tab. Dominic tapped it with one finger, rhythmic like a metronome. Lana noticed how his other hand never left the underside of the table, a show of control, a threat unspoken. Lana stepped in, quiet but deliberate. Black folder clutched to her chest, inside not just her resume, but receipts. Her heels clicked once on the tile floor, then twice. She pulled out the chair across from him, sat down gently. Her heart was hammering so hard it echoed in her ears, but her face was still. She had spent the entire night rehearsing for this moment, and she wasn't going to blink first. Dominic leaned forward. "You know, Lana, sometimes silence says more than words ever could," he smiled. But Lana did not flinch, because Dominic didn't know he wasn't the only one who had planned this meeting. She had been setting the stage too, and the second hand on the wall clock was just about to hit 7. "Nobody will hear you cry." The words cut like a whisper made of ice. Dominic didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to, because in that moment, he wasn't just speaking to Lana. He was staging her collapse. But instead of shrinking, Lana did something he didn't expect. She looked up, locked eyes with him, steady, calm, not defiant, but awake. And in that instant, her mind traveled backward, not just to last week, not to the report he had altered, not even to the meeting he hijacked and claimed as his own. It went further, back 6 months ago, to the very first time she saw his face, to the first handshake, to the first smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. And suddenly, the sterile conference room melted into memory. The past returned like fog rolling in fast and thick. Every sharp detail, every red flag she once brushed aside, it all came rushing back. Because before the whisper came the silence, and before the silence came the invitation. 6 months earlier, Lana Ashford was at the top of her game. She had just led one of the company's most successful product launches in half a decade. Sales exceeded projections. Reviews were glowing. Even the notoriously skeptical CFO had sent a rare email of praise. Whatever she's doing, let her keep doing it. So when she was offered a transfer to the company's flagship department, the one with the highest visibility and the biggest stakes, it felt like a reward, a stepping stone, a recognition of her value. But in truth, it was something else entirely. Her first day in the new department was sharp-collar corporate choreography, handshakes, introductions, smiles that only lasted until backs were turned. And then Dominic Vale. He extended a hand, firm grip, cool palm. His smile was professional but detached. His eyes sharp, scanning like he was already calculating her threat level. "Welcome aboard," he said, voice smooth as glass. "Your reputation precedes you." To anyone else, those might have been kind words. To Lana, something felt off. It was the way he said it, not like a compliment, but like a warning. She smiled politely, thanked him, but inside, something flickered. A subtle, gut-deep tension, a feeling she'd learned long ago not to ignore. Because sometimes it's not the words that betray intent, it's the spaces between them. And Dominic's silence said more than his greeting ever could. It started small, almost invisible, a calendar invite that never came, a thread of emails she never received, her name missing from a team slide deck, even though she'd created half the content. At first, Lana assumed it was just an oversight, new team, new workflows, simple coordination hiccups. But then, it kept happening. She'd walk into a meeting and realize decisions had already been made. Project files were edited without her knowledge. Someone else was credited for insights she'd proposed days earlier. She started triple-checking her inbox, refreshing her calendar, asking teammates gently, "Hey, did I miss a memo?" They'd shift uncomfortably. "Oh, I thought you were in the loop. Maybe check with Dominic." So she did. And every time his response was the same. Must have been a technical error. Sorry, someone must have forgotten to CC you. It won't happen again." But it did, again and again. Lana began to see the pattern. She wasn't being forgotten. She was being erased. And the scariest part, he was doing it with a smile. The first time it happened, Lana told herself she must have misheard. It was during a department meeting. She'd spent 2 weeks developing a new efficiency protocol, one that could cut operating costs by nearly 12%. The team was silent as she presented it. Slides, clean data, airtight. Then, without warning, Dominic interrupted. "That's actually based on Archer's framework from last year," he said casually. "Good to see it being repurposed." Lana blinked. What framework? Archer looked just as confused, but he said nothing. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward her, some impressed, some unsure, all of them now wondering, did she just repackage someone else's work? Lana stayed composed. "I wasn't aware of Archer's version," she said calmly, "but I'd love to compare notes." Dominic didn't answer. He just smiled and moved on. Later that afternoon, Lana searched the archives. No framework, no previous version, nothing. There was no Archer framework, because there had never been one. It was hers. Her research, her late nights, her numbers, her idea. And yet, in the space of a single sentence, Dominic had rewritten the authorship in front of the entire team. No confrontation, no evidence, just enough ambiguity to cast doubt. And for Lana, that doubt began to grow not just around her ideas, but around her own sanity. It didn't happen all at once, not in public, not with yelling or written warnings. No, Dominic was far too calculated for that. He called them coaching sessions. Closed-door one-on-one meetings, always just after lunch, always under the pretense of professional development. Lana would walk in, notepad in hand, ready to talk metrics or strategy. But what came instead was erosion. "I've noticed your presentation style tends to unsettle people." She blinked. "You often speak with too much certainty. It can come off as abrasive. Or maybe tone down the wardrobe a little. Sharp colors and heels like that can feel aggressive in a team environment." There was no formal complaint, no examples, just vague insinuations that her presence was a problem, and because nothing was concrete, it was almost impossible to defend. Each time she tried to clarify, he shifted the goalposts. "It's not a big deal, just some feedback, just something to consider if you want to grow." But growth in Dominic's world meant shrinking, making herself smaller, softer, more manageable. Lana began second-guessing herself before every meeting. She changed her tone, adjusted her outfits, cut back on direct eye contact. Not because she agreed with him, but because she was starting to wonder, what if he's right? And that's how it works. Not with force, but with suggestion. The kind that makes you start apologizing for simply existing. Lana wasn't looking for a scandal. She just wanted to do her job right. The data came in on a Tuesday, routine quality assurance metrics from the new production line. At first, it looked like noise, minor inconsistencies. But as she dug deeper, a pattern emerged. Batch failures. Not random, not one-offs, clusters. The kind of statistical anomalies that didn't just happen. They signaled something deeper, a possible flaw in the production process that could compromise product safety. Lana triple-checked her calculations. Then she ran them again. What she found made her stomach drop. If the trend continued, consumers could be at risk. This wasn't just about efficiency anymore. It was about safety, people's health, people's lives. So she did what any responsible professional would do. She documented everything, wrote a clear, fact-based report, attached raw data, highlighted risks, outlined action steps, and she submitted it to Dominic. 2 days later, he handed her back the final version. She opened it. Her heart sank. The language had changed drastically. Words like risk, non-compliance, and failure clusters were gone. In their place, normal operational variation, within tolerance, expected minor fluctuation. He had sanitized it, whitewashed the threat. Lana approached him quietly. "Dominic, the edits remove critical warnings. This could affect product integrity." His reply was icy calm. "You're overreacting to statistical noise. This isn't your previous department." "We handle things differently here." She paused. "But," he cut her off, "the report is finalized. Distribute it." And with that, the conversation was over. But something inside Lana snapped awake. This wasn't just corporate politics anymore. This was a cover-up. There's a moment in every battle when survival turns into strategy. For Lana, that moment came the day Dominic silenced her warning. She left the conference room that afternoon, not angry, but changed. Something inside her had crystallized. If no one's going to protect me, then I'll protect myself. From that day on, Lana became meticulous in a new way. She created private folders, offline, encrypted, titled innocuously like training materials or Q4 budget notes. Inside them, she stored everything: the original production report with red flag language, the edited version Dominic had rewritten, screenshots of emails, especially the ones he'd altered before forwarding, calendar invites she was excluded from, audio clips from meetings when policy allowed, personal notes dated, time-stamped, factual. It wasn't about revenge. It was about record-keeping, about survival, about sanity. She started keeping a small notebook in her purse at all times, jotted notes after every interaction. Every time Dominic made a subtle dig, questioned her judgment, or gaslit her into self-doubt, she wrote it down. April 14, 2:42 p.m., dismissed my input during client call. Later, reused it and took credit. She even printed hard copies and kept them in a file tucked beneath her kitchen sink, far from prying office eyes. No one knew. Not even her closest colleagues. Because when you're surrounded by silence, sometimes the smartest thing you can do is listen harder, document deeper, wait longer. What Lana built wasn't just a folder, it was a fortress. It happened on a Wednesday. The weekly quality control dashboard pinged at 9:14 a.m. A system-generated alert flagging 3 consecutive batches from the new production line. Lana's stomach sank before she even opened the file. She knew what it meant. Not another random error, not just a fluke. This was a pattern, a confirmation, a signal screaming from the data. She downloaded the raw file. Same machine, same lot. Failure rates spiking in precisely the way she had warned about weeks ago. She cross-checked it with her archived data. It lined up, too perfectly. This wasn't theoretical anymore. It was real, measurable, and if ignored, it was potentially catastrophic. Consumers could be harmed, children, families, people who trusted the product to work. Lana didn't hesitate. She compiled a new report, clear, concise, backed with updated metrics. She highlighted urgency in bold red text. Immediate pause recommended for line 3. Risk of systemic failure across all batches. Then she walked straight into Dominic's office. "We've got a problem," she said. He didn't even look up from his desk. "We're aware of the variations." "These aren't variations. This is failure clustering. It's escalating." He sighed. "Look, Lana, these kinds of spikes happen. It's normal deviation. You're reading too much into it." She took a breath. "Dominic, if we keep pushing these products out—" "Enough," he interrupted. "I said we're handling it. This stays internal." He looked her square in the eye. "Don't make this into something it's not." And just like that, the door closed again on the data, on the warning, and on everything her conscience was screaming to speak. But this time, Lana didn't walk away uncertain. She walked away knowing exactly what she had to do next. She stood her ground. Despite Dominic's dismissal, Lana didn't back down. She sent follow-up emails, attached raw data, cited protocols. She copied in his assistant. She escalated respectfully. But Dominic wasn't interested in evidence. He was interested in control. And one afternoon in the hallway between meetings, he made that clear. His voice was calm. But his words were a loaded weapon. "Lana," he said, "I'd be careful how hard you push. This kind of persistence could affect your place in the team." Just like that, no pretense, no diplomacy, a warning delivered with a corporate smile. It was the sentence she had been waiting for. Not hoping for, not inviting, but the one that confirmed everything. This wasn't about disagreements over data. This was about eliminating a threat. And to Dominic, Lana had crossed that line. By questioning, by insisting, by refusing to be silent. In his eyes, she had become dangerous. And for Lana, it was the final crack in the dam. No more doubts. No more hoping he'd do the right thing. He wasn't just going to discredit her. He was going to erase her. And she wasn't going to let him. That night, the city outside her window buzzed like normal. But inside Lana's apartment, everything was still. No music, no TV. Just the soft hum of her laptop and the steady beat of her heart pounding with purpose. She sat at her dining table, files spread across it like a battlefield. 3 piles, each one labeled in her handwriting. Harassment, every instance of Dominic undermining her in meetings. comments about her tone, clothing, presence, recordings, notes, time-stamped entries. Sabotage, altered emails, missing calendar invites, project ownership stripped from her and reassigned. Her contributions erased her authority, quietly dissolved. Safety violations, the original product reports, data trails, the manipulated language, side-by-side comparisons of what she submitted and what the company distributed. It wasn't just documentation anymore. It was a case. She organized it like she was preparing for court. Chronological, clear, cross-referenced, no emotion, just facts. At 8:42 p.m., she opened her inbox to HR Director Alara, to Legal Counsel, to the Ethics Committee of the Board. She attached the files, each labeled clearly, each impossible to ignore. Subject line, formal escalation, violations of policy, and risk to public safety. In the body, she kept it short. I believe the attached documentation shows a pattern of harassment, targeted sabotage, and deliberate suppression of safety-related data. I have reason to believe retaliation is imminent. I am scheduled for a performance review at 7 a.m. tomorrow. I request immediate intervention. She hit send, and for a long moment, nothing happened. The room was quiet. Then her screen blinked, delivered, and finally, read. And just like that, she'd set the match. Whatever came next, she wouldn't run from it, because now the truth was no longer just hers to carry. 7 a.m. The lights in conference room B flickered on. The air smelled faintly of printer toner and fresh betrayal. Lana stepped in, folder in hand, shoulders square. Dominic was already seated, waiting, smiling. That smile, not warm, not human, just engineered. No greetings, no small talk. Just that thick manila folder on the table, the one with her name on it in bold. He tapped it once with his finger, a slow, deliberate sound. We have a lot to discuss. His voice was calm, measured, like a surgeon about to make the first cut. He didn't start with data, didn't mention metrics or goals. He started with her. Lana, he said slowly, we've received troubling feedback. Concerns about your communication style, your inability to collaborate, even your emotional stability. Lana said nothing. He flipped the folder open like a magician revealing his trick. Inside, selectively clipped emails, reframed quotes, half-truths. You've become disruptive, defensive, some have said volatile. Then came the blow. After today's evaluation, we'll be reviewing your role in the department pending possible transition. There it was, his endgame. Not a direct termination. That would be too easy to contest. Instead, he'd label her difficult, unstable. He'd reassign her into oblivion, silently, efficiently, the corporate version of exile. Dominic leaned back, steepling his fingers. Of course, if you prefer to leave quietly, we can make that transition smoother. The trap had been set. He was waiting for her to fold. But Dominic didn't know. This time, Lana didn't come empty-handed. He was mid-sentence when it happened. Of course, Lana, Dominic was saying. If you feel that a quiet transition out of the team is best for everyone, I'm sure The door opened. Not with a knock, not with hesitation, just opened. 3 people walked in. Era, the HR director, sharp suit, unreadable expression. 2 members of the security team, tall, quiet, firm. Dominic's words stopped midair. His smile froze like a glitch. Era? He asked, trying to laugh. We're in the middle of something. She didn't respond to him. She walked straight to Lana, placed a sealed envelope in front of her. Her voice was clear, firm, and kind. Lana, open it. Lana opened the envelope. Her fingers were steady, her heart louder than ever. Inside, a letter from the board. Acknowledgement of her submitted evidence, confirmation of an immediate investigation, and a temporary reassignment working directly with the executive team. Dominic's face turned colorless. What is this? He demanded. Era finally turned to him. Dominic, we'll need to continue this conversation in my office. Security will escort you. Wait, no. Whatever she told you, it's a lie. Era raised her hand calmly. We've reviewed your documentation. We've also reviewed the unaltered original she provided. She paused. The discrepancies are concerning. His mouth opened again. No words came out. We've also received both versions of the production quality reports, Era added. The board has ordered an immediate halt to Line 3 pending full investigation. Dominic turned to Lana, but this time his look was no longer smug, no longer dismissive. It was pure fear. As security moved beside him, he turned back one last time. "This isn't over," he muttered under his breath, barely audible. But Lana just looked at him, calm, still, unmoving. Because in her heart, she knew exactly what he didn't. It was already over. By 9:30 a.m., it was no longer a secret. Emails flew, phones rang off the hook, and the words no employee ever expected to hear came down from the 14th floor. All operations on Line 3 suspended until further notice. The hallway buzzed with confusion. Managers scrambled, engineers whispered. But Lana, she sat quietly, in a glass-walled room directly across from the boardroom, waiting. 30 minutes later, the door opened. "Miss Ashford," said a voice, "the board is ready for you." She entered. 12 faces, some shocked, some stern, all silent. At the center sat Chairwoman Alvarez, sharp as ice, eyes like radar. "Lana," she said, "we've reviewed the material." She paused. "We'd like you to walk us through what you've uncovered." And Lana did, calm, precise. No drama, just the facts. How production flaws were buried, how Dominic altered reports, how he isolated, silenced, and manipulated, and how she documented every step. By the time she finished, the room wasn't silent anymore. It was furious. What's the exposure risk? How many units shipped with defects? Why didn't quality control flag this? Voices overlapping. Legal counsel typing furiously. One board member stood, face pale. This could trigger a federal recall. Chairwoman Alvarez raised a hand. That's why we're reporting it now. To the Consumer Product Safety Commission and the Federal Trade Commission. Today, there was no vote, no debate, only action. Dominic's badge access was revoked, his company devices confiscated, and within hours, his name appeared on a formal filing, subject of internal and federal investigation. He wasn't just fired, he was exposed. And Lana, she walked out of that boardroom not with applause, but with clarity. She hadn't just survived the system, she'd held it accountable. The further they dug, the deeper it went. Dominic hadn't just bullied Lana, he'd engineered an entire system. 2 sets of HR files. One official, the kind seen in performance reviews, promotions, and legal audits. And one private, stored off system, unregistered, edited only by him. In this hidden file system, the pattern became clear. High-performing employees slowly pushed out. Whistleblowers given soft demotions or made to resign. Weak or overly compliant hires promoted. Why? Because once the team was filled with underperformers, Dominic could step in, make a few changes, and claim dramatic improvement. He built a false decline just to manufacture a recovery. And that recovery, he sold it as leadership genius. PowerPoint decks, quarterly wins, leadership awards. All of it built on deliberate sabotage and manipulated turnover. HR called it disturbing. Legal called it malicious fabrication. Compliance called it a systemic abuse of power. But for Lana, it was something more personal. It meant she had never stood a chance because the game was rigged from the start. And she wasn't the only one. As more people came forward, the list grew. Names, cases, victims. Some had left the company years ago, burnt out, defeated, discredited. Some had just stopped speaking up. And now they were finally being heard. By the end of the week, the inbox at the ethics office was overflowing. Not with praise, but with pain. 16 names, all employees, all former victims, some still at the company, some long gone. Their stories painted a chilling pattern. Job performance suddenly questioned without merit, excluded from meetings without explanation, publicly humiliated in coaching sessions, given impossible goals only to be written up for failure. 4 of them had submitted formal complaints to HR in the past 2 years, and all 4 had disappeared, not literally, but professionally, transferred, silenced, let go with dignity. It wasn't incompetence, it wasn't coincidence, it was orchestration. And at the center of the cover-up, a name no one had expected, Rachel Keene, the former head of HR, a polished executive known for her people-first philosophy. A woman who once hosted wellness retreats and sent out birthday cards. Turns out she was also Dominic's college classmate, and according to system logs, her login credentials had been used to seal, archive, and suppress those 4 complaints. The room went quiet when the discovery hit. It wasn't just one predator, it was a pact of silence. The storm had passed, but the damage still rippling. Dominic Vale was banned from holding any corporate leadership or regulatory oversight role for 5 years by federal order. His LinkedIn vanished, his speaking engagements canceled, and the press wasn't kind. Former VP under fire for falsifying reports. Executive ousted after whistleblower expose. But the company didn't try to hide it. They owned it. A full-page apology appeared in national newspapers. A public product recall was issued for the affected lots. Refunds were offered, no questions asked. And most importantly, a new anonymous reporting system was launched within 30 days. They called it Project Sentinel to protect what we overlooked. But that wasn't the only change. In a quiet announcement sent only to internal staff, Lana received a formal nomination Director of Integrity and Ethics Global Division. Not just a title, a mission. Her first task, design a department that would report directly to the board, not through HR. Staffed with investigators, funded with independence, armed with protection for whistleblowers. For the first time, Lana wasn't reacting to injustice. She was building the walls that would prevent it. And just like that, the woman no one listened to at 7 a.m. was now rewriting the rules. They called it the Phoenix Program, a new initiative, a new beginning. But for Lana, it was deeply personal. The mission was clear: to identify, support, and protect employees who had been manipulated, silenced, or broken by psychological bullying in the workplace. No more anonymous suffering, no more coaching sessions that felt like interrogations, no more pretending everything was fine just to keep a paycheck. Phoenix wasn't just a support program, it was a declaration that dignity at work was a right, not a luxury. And the first mentor Lana invited, Thalia Chen. Years ago, Thalia was one of the brightest product strategists at the company, sharp, empathetic, a natural leader. Until Dominic slowly cut her out, took credit for her designs, then publicly questioned her emotional stability. HR offered her a soft exit, she took it, but the spark never left her. Now, standing in front of a new class of Phoenix Fellows, Thalia's voice was clear. You're not broken, you're not weak. You were targeted because you threatened the people who feared real talent. Lana stood in the back watching. This wasn't just redemption, it was restoration. It started quietly, 1 voice, then 2. By the end of the month, 4 more employees had filed internal complaints, 2 of them involving managers who had worked under Dominic. They thought the spotlight would fade. They thought the dust had settled. But Lana's story had stirred something deeper, the belief that silence was no longer safer than truth. And then one afternoon, as Lana was leaving a Phoenix training session, a young woman stepped up. She couldn't have been more than 27. Nervous eyes, badge clipped to a too big blazer, a tremor in her voice. Miss Ashford, I just wanted to say, I've worked here for 3 years, and until I heard your story, I didn't think we were allowed to speak. She hesitated, then smiled softly. Your courage gave me mine. Lana didn't speak right away. She just nodded because she understood. This was what real change looked like. Not policy, not paperwork, but permission. Permission to stand, to speak, to refuse to shrink. And as the elevator doors closed behind her, Lana realized something. She came into that 7 a.m. meeting expecting to survive. Now she was helping others rise. 1 year later, the company that once turned a blind eye now stood on stage accepting the National Ethics and Leadership Award. The same walls that once held whispers of fear now echoed with transparency, accountability, and courage. And Dominic, the man who once ruled with silence and subtle threats, not a single corporation would touch his resume. His legacy? Not numbers, not awards, just absence. But for Lana, this was never about revenge. That morning, as she stood beside her team watching the award ceremony on a live stream in the Phoenix conference room, she was asked to speak. She paused, then simply said, "I didn't speak out to ruin someone. I spoke out because the silence was ruining everyone." She looked around the room, faces from all departments, from every background, and every single one of them still standing. She added, "Truth doesn't need to scream. It just needs to survive long enough to be heard." And in that moment, it did. Silence doesn't protect you. It protects the abuser. In a world where power often hides behind closed doors, truth can feel fragile. But sometimes all it takes is one voice, like Lana's, to spark a fire that exposes an entire system. You don't have to shout. You don't have to be the strongest in the room. You just have to not break. You just have to speak. Because sometimes courage doesn't change the past, but it can save the future. Yours, someone else's, and a whole culture waiting to be rebuilt. If Lana's story moved you, if you've ever stayed silent or are still trying to find your voice, subscribe to Through Her Eyes today. Every week, we tell true stories of truth, courage, and reclaiming dignity through the eyes of those who were silenced but never broken. Because you deserve to hear what's right, and someone out there is still waiting for you to tell their story.